You're listening to an episode of the NEPA Freethought Society Podcast, recorded and streamed live on February 18th of 2012. Toward the end of today's episode, we'll be taking viewer questions first from our live audience in Jason International Studios, and then from our online audience. Our cameraman and producer Jason will be taking questions from the live stream chat room. The NEPA Freethought Society is a secular discussion and activist group located in the northeastern Pennsylvania area. The group is intended to be a coalition of non-believers comprised of atheists, secular humanists, skeptics, agnostics, etc., predicated on support and community. The group gathers monthly to discuss any pertinent issues and fully intends on defending the rights of the secular when and where appropriate. We maintain that the separation of church and state is important and critical thinking should be prevalent in all areas of life. More information about the NEPA Freethought Society, including upcoming meetings, special guest speaker appearances, and much more, could be found at nepafreethought.org. Our podcast is available for free on the iTunes Store and through our website. You can also subscribe through an RSS feed on our website. Our live stream page, including a schedule of upcoming live episodes and archived videos, could be found at nepafreethought.org/news/livestream. I'm Justin Vacula, host of this podcast. I'm the co-organizer, spokesperson, and a board member of the NEPA Freethought Society.
I'm Rodney Collins, the founder and the board chairman of the NEPA Freethought Society. I'm also involved in local church-state separation issues.
Today's special guest is Jen Hancock. Jen is the author of the Humanist Approach to Happiness, Practical Wisdom, and Jen Hancock's Handy Humanism Handbook. She writes a freelance column about humanism for the Bradenton Herald newspaper, writes for Examiner.com as the Tampa Humanist and Freethought Examiner, and publishes the Happy Through Humanism blog and podcast. Jen is also a speaker specializing in humanism, ethics, and morality. Bioethicist and author Torben Reese has called Jen one of the finest minds in humanism today. Jen's website, with links to her various works, could be found at jen-hancock.com. Thanks, Jen, for coming on the podcast today. It's great to have you.
Well, thanks for having me on.
All right. What you're here to talk about today is humanism and ethics. Can you please provide a definition of humanism that you use in your writings for readers who may not know what humanism is, so that we're all talking about the same thing?
Sure. I like to use the American Humanist Association definition because it's concise, if not a little geeky. Humanism is a progressive philosophy of life that, without supernaturalism, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good of humanity. In other words, live your life to the fullest, love other people, and try to leave the world a better place.
And viewers may wonder, of all topics, what leads you to write about humanism?
I'm a humanist. That's what I know. No, I mean, I was raised, I'm like a third generation freethinker on both sides of my family. And, this is the value system I was raised with, all right? I didn't know it had a name because my family didn't know it had a name because humanism was only given a name as a standalone philosophy about 100 years ago, right? And my family has been freethinkers before that. So it's just about being a good person. Like, that's how I was raised, not with religion, but with morality. Be a good person. And it turns out, like, when I found the humanist movement, I'm like, oh, my, piecemeal philosophy that I came together for myself has a name and a movement. I was shocked. And when I do writing and I talk to people and I give presentations on humanism, the response I normally get is, I didn't know that my philosophy had a name, and I'm so relieved that it does, that I'm not the only one who came to this conclusion about how to live my life ethically and compassionately and responsibly. So that's why I do it, is because it turns out it's really, people don't know about it, and they want to know about it, and there you go. I have something to offer the world.
Jen, I wanted to ask you, as far as humanism goes, do you attempt to get your message out to women more so? Because, I know that men seem to gravitate more towards non-belief than women do, it seems, statistic-wise.
Oh, no, that's not true.
No?
I think what happens is, like, my fan base is free thinkers and atheists who aren't interested in atheism as a movement. Like, they're non-believers themselves or atheists themselves, but they don't really care if anybody else is. All right, what they care about is how to be a good person. What they want to talk about is morality and ethics and what it means to be a good person, and how can you be compassionate in the face of complete jerks on a plane who are putting their seat back all the way into your lap, right? Mm-hmm. That's the conversation that a lot of people want to have. And, the existing kind of atheist skeptic movement doesn't have room for people like that. They look at that and they go, why are you talking? I don't care about religion. I'm an atheist. So what? Let's talk about what really matters. It's kind of like, if you had an opinion that, Little Red Riding Hood was not a very good morality tale, and instead of talking about what was a good basis for morality, you kept going on and on about how stupid Little Red Riding Hood is. Most people think that's a little weird. And so even, atheists, there's a ton of atheists out there that have no interest in the atheist movement, because the atheist movement is an anti-theist movement, not an atheist movement.
Okay, thank you.
So my fan base is atheists and non-religious people that are not interested in talking about whether there's God or not. They've already decided they don't believe there's God, so why would they talk about it anymore? What they want to talk about is how do you live your life now that you've made that decision.
Got you.
In Chapter 5 of your Handbook on Humanism, you note various misconceptions some persons might have about humanism or humanists. Can you talk about some of those and why you think the views are incorrect?
All right, so are we Satanists? Yeah, no. No, and I think all non-religious people get this one, right? Are you a Satanist? Only Satanists will answer. Satanists are going to answer that question. Yes, I am. The rest of the non-religious community is going to go, no. If I was a Satanist, I'd have told you I'm a Satanist, right? So that's like the funniest one, if you want to put it. Everybody who says they're not religious or an atheist or a freethinker, they get that from religious people all the time. But it's other things. The questions I find the most interesting are like, how can you be moral without God? Right? I love that question, because now we're talking about what I want to talk about, which is morality and ethics. And how do we think about ethics? What are our values as individuals? And why do we hold those values? I find that conversation fascinating.
Well, that goes into another question here. Philosopher Christine Korsgaard, in her book The Sources of Normativity, discusses what she calls the fact of value, the notion that we all act from ideas about how to live. She writes, "The fact of value is a mystery. Philosophers have been trying to solve it. If the real and the good are no longer one, value must find its way into the world somehow. So what is your accounting for the fact of value?"
Well, we're human animals, right? And we've evolved to be the animals that we are. And for some reason, we've evolved an emotional toolkit. And amongst that emotional toolkit are things like compassion and guilt, love and hate and anger and frustration. There's a whole range of emotions we're capable of feeling. And, I think the humanist perspective is that we evolved to have these emotions for a reason, and it's upon these emotions that we have that we come to judge things that happen to us and to others as either good or bad, which is the basis of morality and ethics. Ethics is a system of how you determine what is good and what is bad. And humanists just say, look, our compassion informs almost everybody in the world, whether they're religious or non-religious. This is one of those things that's been studied and known. Compassion informs most people's ethics for a reason. All a humanist is doing is saying that's sufficient unto itself. We do not need to ascribe our compassion to a higher power for it to be a valuable basis for our morality. It's sufficient unto itself. We can tell it works. It makes us feel better when we're acting out of compassion. And acting on our compassion and our reason leads to really good outcomes for ourselves and for other people and for the society in which we live. And that's all the proof we need to know that that works.
Okay. Jen, what books have you written so far?
Well, I've written The Humanist Approach to Happiness, Practical Wisdom, which was written for tweens and teens and young adults to teach critical thinking skills and ethics and decision-making in a framework that young people would understand it in. So how do you decide who you want to date and be in a relationship with? How do you deal with peer pressure? What about financial management? Drinking, driving, drugs? Let's talk about these in the framework of how we make our decisions, not to say, here's the decision you need to make, here's what's right and what's wrong. but how would you as an individual figure out this problem and decide what's right for you? All right, and that's what the book is about. It's in use at the Royal Military College of Canada to teach critical thinking skills and decision making to the cadets in the leadership program there. It's being put in the curricula for the UU for youth education, character development, and ethics. And it's been very well received by every youth educator that's read the book, precisely because it's not preachy, although I'm opinionated in it. It's designed to encourage people to think for themselves what sort of person they want to be and how they might make better decisions in accordance with their values. The second book I wrote is called Jen Hancock's Humanism Handbook, and I wrote it to be kind of a free ebook. Like if you sign up for my mailing list, I'll give it to you free as an ebook. And it's just a quick overview of the philosophy, because humanists tend to be really verbal and academic, and it's really hard to find a quick, concise, here's what you need to know about the philosophy overview. Here's the history, here's what we value, here's how we think about different things. And I just wanted to provide a quick book like that. So those are my two books. I'm currently editing, just went into the editing phase for my new book, which is called The Bully Vaccine. And it's going to be for tweens and teens to talk about how to deal with bullies, from the, how not to be a target, how to behave so that you're not a target, and also how to end a bullying situation, even if it's chronic, after it's started. So
one thing,
we'll see what people think about that.
Okay.
One thing you've mentioned in your writings about how humanism often gets overlooked, and you did what you called name dropping, and you mentioned a lot of famous humanists, and you've also mentioned things like the abolition of slavery being credited to humanism. Well, one current movement, of course, is the LGBT movement, and we see a lot of resistance in many cases from some religious organizations, and we see that the humanists at large, it seems, are leading the charge here. So
when the religious right blames the gay rights movement on humanists, all I have to say is guilty as charged. We led the women's, it was humanists, people who identified themselves as humanists, that led the fight for women's rights and health care and reproductive freedom. And yeah, it's the humanist philosophy that says whoever you want to love, as long as you're not hurting anybody, go for it. It's no business of mine, all right? It's this understanding that humans are human and they have the right to make decisions for themselves that underlies the idea that it would be okay for gay people to be gay and that there's nothing wrong with being gay, So yeah, guilty as charged. And again, a lot of people at the forefront of that movement have been humanists. We're guilty as charged. The whole idea of sexual freedom and sexual rights and sexual identity right, was first, I think, written down in the 60s by humanists. And the first sex educators and sexologists were humanists. So yeah, guilty as charged. Sexual freedom, you can thank the humanists for that.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, not me specifically, obviously.
I understand.
The movement the people in the movement as a whole. Yeah, we're very big on individual freedom and liberty.
Okay.
So,
are you working on any books currently?
I just started writing a book called Humanism for Businesses. And it's going to be a primer for humanistic business management, which is the big topic in business circles and business schools right now. Like, how do we apply humanism to capitalism? And apparently at Davos this year, it was the big topic of conversation. So I'm hard at work on my Humanism for Businesses book, and hopefully we'll have that by the fall, out by the fall. We'll see.
All right. Well, would you happen to have any favorite authors that you might want to discuss or name? I mean.
All right. So Bertrand Russell. I'm reading Bertrand Russell right now. I really, really love Voltaire. Everything I've read of Voltaire I like. And Camus. I'm a big Camus fan. I tend to alternate my philosophy reading with my fantasy and sci-fi reading and fiction reading. So like right now, my son and I are reading the Philip Pullman's book, the Golden Compass, that trilogy. We just started that.
Okay.
So But I'm reading Bertrand Russell right now, so.
I saw the Golden Compass movie.
The books are better.
Books are almost always better.
I have to get around to the book.
In this case, they're way better. And you have to read the whole trilogy because the problem is it doesn't look like they're going to make the second or the third book. And to understand what's going on, you really have to get to the third book.
Okay.
But it's really cool. It's really cool. And, you know, the religious people are like, oh, they kill God at the end. They don't kill God at the end. They release him from his prison. Mm-hmm. It's cool. It's a very cool book.
I guess that was killing him to them.
Yeah. It was like basically they freed God from the imprisonment that the Megatron or whatever, you know, was holding him in. It's a cool book.
All right.
Pan-dimensional, very cool.
In an article in The Humanist titled 7 Things to Avoid When Talking to Strangers About Humanism, you write that some humanists aren't sure what to say if talking about humanism to someone unfamiliar. What would be some advice for viewers?
I think what happens is humanists tend to think that they need to talk about the God question, what God, not God. They think that's what people need to know about philosophy. And it turns out, like so I'm a professional humanist, right? This is what I do. Okay. So when I meet someone new and they say, what do you do? I say, I'm a writer. What do you write? I write about humanism. Okay. Well, what's humanism? So I get this daily, if not weekly. And people really aren't that shocked to find out you're not a religious person. What they want to know is the morality issue. That's what they want to know. They're not the God, not God. Okay, fine, you don't believe, but how do you live your life? That's what they want to know. And so if you don't focus on the God, not God question, which pretty much everybody but rabid atheists think is uninteresting. You know? No offense to my atheist friends, but the most people don't want to talk about that. And you focus instead on the stuff that is interesting, like our morality and our, you know, political issues and things like that. People really get excited about it. My experience is when I talk to people about humanism and I talk about, okay, here's our ethics, it's about being a good person, here's how we go about doing this is why we're into critical thinking and skepticism, because we really want to solve our problems. People get really, really excited about the philosophy. And like, you know, what you have a choice, right? If you're going to talk about the atheism question, you know, you're going to turn people off. If you're going to talk about the ethics and the morality and the critical thinking and why the critical thinking in terms of problem solving, people get really excited. Which is the response you would rather have from someone you're talking to? Right? You want the people to be excited by what you're saying. You don't want to piss them off unless there's a good reason for it. You know, I would rather get a religious person excited about critical thinking and skepticism than tell them they're stupid for believing what they believe. My personal opinion.
That makes good sense. I was going to ask you, how often do you do speaking events? How many times a year do you do speaking events?
Oh my gosh, I have been giving talks every weekend since like January. I'm ready to have my weekends free. Yeah. It's nice to be
We're happy to help you with that.
Right. It's nice to be in demand. It's nice that people are calling me to ask me to speak to their groups. On the other hand, I want my weekends free. So, but right now, like my business seems to be giving secular sermons to Unitarian Universalist congregations. And like I'm giving one tomorrow on compassion to a group, to the University UUs in Orlando. And then the following weekend, I'm giving a talk on the future of humanism to the UU of Manatee County. And then that next Wednesday, I'm giving a talk on the Humanist Approach to Happiness to a Lifelong Learning Academy. So within the next 2 weeks, I got 3 speaking gigs.
Okay, it sounds like you keep you pretty busy.
So I'm
then.
busy. I'm really busy. I'd like is to be less busy and paid more.
I don't want that.
More per speech and speak less. That's what I would like with this. This is my goal for the next year.
Okay.
Nice to be in demand, but I'd like to have my weekends. I'm getting tired of working every week. I miss my family.
That's understandable. Have you made your way up to Pennsylvania at all for any events?
Not recently. I've been there in the past, but not recently, no. And I'm trying to, because I have a family, I'm going to try and focus on building my speaking business here in Florida primarily, because I don't want to be, again, you know, that far away from my family for any length of time. I mean, I'm willing to come up if the price is right, obviously. obviously. But I'm actually trying to, what I want to do is morph my business into speaking to businesses about humanistic business management because they'll pay.
Okay.
I don't want to be cynical, but girl's got to eat. Boy needs a new pair of shoes.
Well, I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
That's just how it goes, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Let me see. What's your next, where will you be speaking next?
Like I said, tomorrow I'm doing
that's right.
sermon, The Power of Compassion to the University you use.
Okay, tomorrow.
And then the following weekend I'm giving a secular sermon on the future of humanism to the UU of Manatee County. And, on my website, it's actually, because I have so many things coming up, which again is really nice. I'm really glad I'm in demand. I just wish people would pay more. Okay, so if you go to my website and you go to the speaking page, there is a list of all my upcoming events.
Okay.
That's probably the best way for people to find me but they're all I gotta warn you, they're all in Florida. Although I have a guy who is willing to pay for an all expenses paid trip for my entire family to Bahrain for some help I gave him on helping his family. But we're gonna wait till my son is older and the conflict there dies down.
Okay.
One thing on your page I noted was working with the Center for Inquiry. Can you talk about the upcoming class you're going to be having with John Shook?
Sure. It's an 8-week class. It's called the Humanist Approach to Happiness. It's a life skills class, and it's based on a class I was giving to a lifelong learning academy here down in Florida. And it's basically 6 hours of video, and there's a whole hour, say, on humanist approach to ethics. Right, and the humanist approach to responsibility, and the humanist approach to compassion, and the humanist approach to critical thinking. So we're going to go through all these elements of humanism and then tie them all together to how these help someone, live a happy, successful, and productive life. And the people who have taken the course so far, because I've taught it already, really, really like the class. In fact, most of the people, I just finished, Thursday was the last day of the semester for the class I was teaching live. And they all want me to teach it again because they want to take it again because apparently it was so thought-provoking to them. So we're going to do that and make all those videos of the presentations available to people at CFI and then add, an extra week in there, a couple extra weeks with extra information, the sort of stuff that my class was asking, like the last day is okay, what do we do with this information? And we'll be talking about that. Now, the CFI class is, it starts March 1st, but you can register through March 8th. There's a limited number of seats available. They'll only allow 120 registrations. If you can't get into that, and I think it's $100 for the class because it's a 2-month class. If you can't get into that, by mid-March, I'll be selling this program as download videos. With the handouts and the lecture notes and everything from my website. But again, it's going to be about $100. So.
Okay.
And it's one of those things it's one of the things I'm most proud of in terms of what I've created in my life. Like when I published The Humanist Approach to Happiness, I didn't know if anybody would like it. I was actually pretty shocked by how much people liked it. I thought people would take issue with parts of it, but the reviews on the book have been overwhelmingly not just good, but really, really, really good. This is a program that, when I put it together, I'm giving the class live, and I'd end the class on ethics, and people would be asking questions about critical thinking, which was the next week's class. And we'd finish up the class on critical thinking, and people would be asking questions about compassion, which was the next week's class. So it flows extremely well. And it really is thought-provoking and will help you figure out who you want to be and how you want to be in this world. And that's half the battle of living, from my perspective.
Okay. Do you do much?
So I recommend it. Recommend it highly.
Do you do much blogging?
Yeah. I have my podcast, which is little 1 minute, 1.5 minute, how to be a better person in 1.5 minutes a week. And then I have my Happiness Through Humanism blog. And then if you want more political commentary from a humanist perspective, that's on my Sumo Girl website. And those are all linked from my jen-hancock.com website. So you can find everything I do at the main website, jen-hancock.com.
Okay. Given the fact that you are a female humanist, do you
I'm a girl.
yes? Well, do you get that? Do you find that you get more feedback from women, as far as that they've learned something or they've been impressed by what you have to say?
My fan base is probably about equally male and equally female. So, some of the people I've given the most help to have been men.
Okay.
So I think it's about equal. The questions women ask are not substantially different from the questions the men ask me.
Okay. I just figured, a lot of people who are religious, they'll look at the Bible and say, well, the Bible says we're supposed to live this way and live a certain way, and they try to keep women down, as we know. So I guess my question would be, if a woman was to come to you who was of the mindset of she was religious and she was, I guess, say, trying to adhere to the Bible's teachings, basically misogynistic teachings, what kind of message would you tell somebody like that? Or if they're sitting on the fence also, they weren't sure which way they were going.
I'm not a proselytizer. I'm what one of my fundamentalist friends say is an evangelizer, and I'm told that's not a bad word. It doesn't mean I'm trying to convert anybody. Okay. I'm just witnessing the humanist lifestyle. All right. I'm an example of what it is to live successfully, non-religiously. All right. So, I don't ever enter into a conversation to convert anybody because that's so opposed to my values. I just would never do it. As far as I'm concerned, if I like someone and they're a nice person and they're succeeding in their life, what they believe is their business. It's not my business. It's their choice, not my choice. However, they ask me questions, and I do get a lot of questions. And actually, the people on the fence that ask me the most questions are almost always male. I just explain, here's how I view it. This is my experience in life. This is why I made this choice. It doesn't mean you need to make this choice, but this is how it works for me. My sense is that if a woman's lost her faith, she's pretty okay with it. I think my experience is I get more men struggling with this issue than women do. So, I have friends that are very religious because I live in the South. And, I have friends that are moderately religious and very religious. And they all seem to be fine with me being a humanist. I don't agree with some of the choices that they make for their families because obviously I think science is important. But other than that, it's, they seem to all appreciate the fact that I'm all about values and morality, right? So.
Yeah, that's one of the common misconceptions we talked about before that, well, if you don't believe, then you must have no morals, everything is relative, etc. So that's a very damaging stereotype.
Right. And, I think here's like a really interesting experience. Like I said, I have a lot of friends that are religious because, I'm a mom, I hang out with other moms. And one time, one of these moms wanted to take me and my son to a museum. Or we are members, so it was just go with them to the museum because she wanted to ask me more about humanism. Well, she's a religious person, but when we were talking about it, she said, Jennifer, I agree wholeheartedly. The reason to be a good person isn't because God wants you to be good. The reason to be a good person is so you don't lie awake at night racked with guilt. God's will or non-will has nothing to do with it. It has to do with my guilt. And, that's a humanist approach to morality right there. That is humanism applied to morality and ethics right there. And this is a person of faith saying that. So I think the number of people who firmly ground their morality in God's will are actually quite small. There's not many people that do that. And studies on, like the Institute for Global Ethics has done surveys on this, and they found exactly this. Most people base their morality on compassion. It doesn't matter where you live or what you believe. People base their values on compassion. The people who base their values on something other than compassion are not the norm, and their results are usually like way out there enough that everybody else goes, dude, I believe in God, but I do not agree with that. So for me, the experience is that more more people agree with me than disagree with me. I can't recall anybody I've had a conversation with who didn't agree with a humanist basis of morality. In fact, what usually happens is religious people want to say publicly that this is their value system, but they don't know how to do it within the religious framework. Like, that's more the problem. They want to, and when you tell them, oh, well, you can say you approach your Christianity humanistically, they get really excited because they agree with the morality. The only thing they don't agree with is a rejection of the supernatural, right? And as long as we're fine with that, they're not humanists because humanism is without supernaturalism, but they could be humanistic, and they need that label to distinguish themselves from the forms of Christianity that they themselves find so abhorrent.
Well,
and it's the same forms that we find abhorrent. They find abhorrent too, and they want to be able to distinguish themselves from that. And humanism, to say I'm a humanistic Christian, helps them say, no, you've got morality wrong. Morality is not about God's will. Morality is about being a good person.
Well, you write,
find that through compassion.
You write in your handbook, it isn't religious belief that makes you moral, it is your personal adherence to a moral system that makes you moral. So that seems to go along the lines of what we were just saying, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the problem I think that people who, base their morality on God's will is that God's will is unknowable. They admit it's unknowable, right? So it's not a very good, right off the bat, not a very good basis for morality. Just saying. Don't want to be rude, but just saying. There's other problems. There's other problems with the religious-based morality, and I go into that in my class. But for most people, their religious morality and their secular morality, their rational morality, integrate just fine. They think what gets them into heaven is the same thing that benefits, it makes sense in a rational world. So in a Christian context, God wants you to be compassionate, right? Well, from the rational standpoint, compassion is good because it leads to all sorts of benefits to yourself and to the society in which you live. We don't need the religious justification to it. But for most people, the religious justification reinforces the rational justification. Does that make sense? So there's usually no conflict between your rational ethics and your religious ethics. It's just that a humanist doesn't have religious ethics at all.
Follow you. I don't know if you've heard or not, but it's been stated that this is the year of the Bible here in Pennsylvania by our state assembly.
Really? Have they read it?
Well, I don't even think they read the resolution. There were some people recently who said they haven't even read the resolution. So I guess if they couldn't read the resolution, they haven't read the Bible. I don't know.
I always wonder when people say, "Oh, we need to." I think what happens is the only Bible they've read was the children's version, so they don't actually know. Like, they don't understand that it's a book of violent pornography.
Yeah.
With people doing sheep and all sorts of, they don't know what's in there because they've only read the sanitized version that cuts out all the juicy bits, for children. Well, the problem is that these juicy bits are morality tales. And they're kind of interesting. It's just that it doesn't say what they think it says.
Our politicians are telling the state that we need to live by these guidelines in the Bible, and that this is the year of it.
Yeah, they don't know they haven't read the Bible then.
They're getting a little out of hand around here. We're on top of that though, but they are getting out of hand.
Yeah, they clearly haven't read the Bible then. That's all I have to say. They haven't read it. One of the books I want to write is a Humanist Bible study guide that actually goes through the stories and says, okay, here's how I as a humanist read the story. We're not going to take a quote out of context, right, to mean whatever we want it to mean. We're going to read the whole story and see, oh, this isn't about masturbation. This is about the fact that women don't like being sold into sexual slavery. Mm-hmm. Okay, here's the real morality that you can get out of the Bible if you're reading it for morality, because there's a reason it's violently pornographic. It just doesn't make for good children reading.
Mm-hmm. I guess if you can get them to stand still long enough, they would listen. But that's a task.
Understand. They would not understand what's in there. I mean, you have to sanitize it and simplify it. Like, have you ever read Genesis and realized, wait, the animals don't go 2 by 2 on the ark?
Mm-hmm.
It's not 2 by 2. It's like 7 and 1.
Yeah.
Still want to know how those termites fit in there and got through it all.
Right. But... And the boat didn't sink.
Yes, it's very suspect that situation there. But yes, we've been trying to make things happen up here in Northeast Pennsylvania for the last almost 5 years now. Our organization, we're trying to spread the word of secularism throughout NEPA. As I told you earlier, there's no groups nearby, so we're pretty much the only game in town, and we're trying to get the message across that you don't have to, as you said before, you don't need to live your life by an ancient, crude belief system. That if all you need to do is really study, look at what it has to say, and then think about it, and maybe even discuss it.
Yourself. I think a lot of people like the idea of God, and that's their business. But if you don't, or you're doubting, that's okay too. There's nothing wrong, with either of any of that. There's problems believing things that aren't true. I'll tell you that. It's not the stuff we know that gets us into trouble. It's the stuff we know that isn't so, that causes all the harm in the world. So, choose what you believe carefully.
Well, it often seems to be the case, while we're on the topic of the Bible, is that people bring their morality to the book. They'll look at it and say, this part is wrong and here's why. I mean, they don't open the book and say, oh, slavery, this is okay because it's in there. We're obviously making judgments based on what we know before looking at the book.
Right. And that's the way we should be reading it, as far as I'm concerned.
For what it is.
Yeah, for what it is, exactly.
Why do you think the topic of morality even comes up in discussions about religion? Because it's often been the case where I would happen to be in a debate or discussion about God's existence, and the topic of morality would just happen to come up, even when I wasn't to introduce it.
It doesn't just happen to come up. It is the central topic of humanity. That's why it comes up. It is the number one. If talking about what is good and what is bad is not the most important thing we could be discussing, I don't know what is.
I agree with you on that.
So it comes up because it's important. It's more important than whether God exists or not. As far as I'm concerned, God's existence is completely irrelevant to me. All right? If God exists, he either approves of my morality, or it doesn't. But I'm not changing my morality because my morality is good. I feel very confident about my morality, because I've spent so much time thinking about who I want to be and why I want to be that. So the existence of God or not God is irrelevant to that. What's really important is how we decide to act. It's like, okay, you've decided what you believe about God, the universe, and everything. Now what? Well, the now what is how are you going to live? And that can only be answered through morality and ethics. And that's why it's so important. And that's why it comes up every single time. And that should tell you something. When I talked about what do people want to talk about? Well, they don't want to talk about God, not God. They find that topic uninteresting. What they want to talk about and why they keep steering the conversation to morality is because that's what they want to talk about. That's a fruitful conversation for everyone involved.
I had a discussion the other day with an acquaintance of mine. We were talking about their belief, and I pretty much told the person that if you're really interested in knowing what is what, you should do some studying for yourself and actually maybe have some discussions with somebody who thinks differently from yourself. Because if all you want to do is speak to people who are of the same mindset as yourself, you're not going to learn anything if there's anything to be learned. Of course, I got some negative feedback, but I maybe still might have got the wheels turning a little bit because, like I said, there's no need to sit there and just keep talking to people who already agree with you. If you want to hear the other side, then maybe some progress could be made one way or another.
Right. I think the problem that the atheist movement has is that we say that, but then we're not willing to listen to them.
Well, I've been listening to them for a long time, personally.
It's like, but from their perspective, right, they don't know how long you've been thinking about this. Right? They don't know your experience of having thought through this, and that what they just told you you've heard 5,000 times before, and you rejected it. They don't know that.
Well, I mean, for us, what we do and what I do is say, here, our content's out there, and you talked about a non-proselytizing attitude, and I'm pretty much firmly with that, because I put the content up. People don't have to listen to it if they don't want to. People can go do their own investigation, come to their own conclusions. And we recently had a debate, as I mentioned, with a Methodist minister, so that was a good, fruitful discussion for us and for others to make their own decisions and come to the conclusions they think are warranted.
Yeah, one of the things that, I've experienced is, when I meet a creationist, I'll say, oh, okay, well, that's not exactly true. Like, what you believe isn't exactly true. And they go, yeah, it is. I say, well, fine, whatever. It's not really true. You should probably find out why. And then and what usually happens is they try to get me to tell them why I don't think it's correct. I'm like, look, I don't want to get into this with you. All right? You need to read some books to find out what evolutionists are actually talking about, because what you're talking about has nothing to do with evolution.
Yeah, we had
Enough said. If you want to do anything with that information, that's fine. It's not my job to convince you that you're wrong about, evolution. All I'm going to tell you is you don't know what you're talking about. And as far as I'm concerned, when someone tells me I don't know what I'm talking about, I take that seriously.
Okay.
I go and find out why they think I don't know what I'm talking about. Because it might be that I'm willing to admit I might be wrong. I might not know what I'm talking about. It's important for me to know whether I'm talking with authority or not. So, and that tends to work really well, because then people turn around and they're like, I need to know what you know. Tell me what you know, oh master.
Jen,
and it works really well. So you're not trying to convert anybody. You're just like, that's not quite right. And they're like, really? As opposed to that's wrong.
Okay. Jen, are you involved in any activism in your state, in your area?
Kind of, I suppose. I organize a humanist families group because I'm a mom. But my time, because I'm a mom of a 6-year-old in kindergarten, and I'm trying to write, and I got all these speaking gigs, I don't have a lot of time for activism anymore. So I'm hoping that come the fall, my son and I can get involved in the election, because my son is really, really for Obama. And I've told him we'll go canvassing. And for him, it's all about education. He doesn't like Republicans because he thinks they're going to take away education for kids, which is my husband and I's fault. He listens to us talking about stuff. He's got a 6-year-old mind, but we've told him we'll go out and canvass. But that's probably going to be about it for a while. Although right now, I have to tell you, I haven't been this mad about women's reproductive freedom in a long time. The current attack on women is pissing me off something fierce. Mm-hmm. So, my podcast next week, I've blogged about it. I'm going to blog about it again as soon as we get off. I'm really upset about what's going on with that. It's like, look, women's health care, our uteruses are part of our body. Our uterus deserves health care like the rest of us. Mm-hmm. Period. Stop telling us that we can't have it because your beliefs are more important than my health.
Well, that's just the theocratic movement. It's completely out of hand.
Just yeah. So you're going to start seeing me. I'm getting your hands off my uterus, man. Kind of activism.
Okay, I understand.
And that's another reason why to get involved in the next election. Just saying. Okay, I know you guys are nonprofit, nonpartisan, but whatever. My opinion. My opinion is we can't let the theocrats get elected. Okay.
Well, we appreciate your honesty. Keep it real.
Do you have any more questions, or we just No. Okay. All right. So we're going to be taking some questions first from our live audience here in Jason International Studios. So does anyone in the audience have a question for Jen? Okay, we have a question.
First, I want to say thank you for speaking with us and everything, and I appreciate what you had to say. I was just wondering, what is your advice for somebody who wants to take a step in the direction of humanism? Like, what is that first step?
You probably already are a humanist. So the first step is to find out more about humanism and find out if that really does describe your philosophy of life. All right, that's the first step, is to know whether or not you really are a humanist or not, right? Because if you're not, then there's knowing that is a good thing, and if you are, knowing that's a good thing as well. Mm-hmm. And then it's a matter of, finding what sort of movement and community works for you. Some humanists need community, some humanists don't. But what happens is humanism is a choice. It's an individual choice. It's a choice to be the best, most ethical person you can be. So the next step, having decided you're a humanist, if that's what describes you, is to set about living your life intentionally as a humanist. It's a choice. It's an active choice of how to live your life. And then the more you learn about morality and ethics and how you're going to integrate that, the easier it is for you to integrate it into your life and how you want to be active. Some humanists are social activists and they're political activists. Some of them form philosophy discussion clubs. We have a humanist family group. There's no right way to be a humanist. You know, everybody's needs are different. Some people form volunteering clubs and they volunteer together as a way to express their values in the community in which they live. So, you know, I think the first step is to figure out whether or not this label, this philosophic label, applies to you or not.
Okay, thank you.
You have a question? Okay, so off to the live stream chat room. Viewers, if you have any questions, please feel free to relay them in the live stream chat room. Our camera person, Jason, will relay the questions to Jen.
Yes, hello, Jen. This is Jason, the producer.
Hi.
Hello. We do have 2 questions from our online viewers. I'm going to ask you those here.
Okay.
This one comes from Jay. Jay asks, when it comes to the acceptance of humanism, do you find a resistance from those type of non-believers who were born into a religion and then had to struggle to deconvert from it? In other words, why a new ism to take on?
Yes. The answer is yes. There is a resistance there because they don't want to take on a new ism. And also, a lot of times the concern, their major concern isn't about morality and values. Their major concern is freeing themselves of the dogma that has infected their brain, right? So for a lot of people who are deconverting, it's natural that free thought, the practice and techniques and discipline of free thought would be their primary concern, because that's what they have to learn themselves in the immediate present that they've got, right? If you don't know how to think critically and skeptically, you need to learn how to do that before you can really start applying that to your morality.
Great. The second question we have comes from Tracy Smith, a.k.a. Freethought MC.
Oh, hi, Tracy. I know Tracy. He's from Orlando.
Yes. And he brought up I guess there's a news article about Major Ray Bradley from Fort Bragg, and he is fighting to get humanist on the military's official list of recognized religious preferences.
Yes.
And,
amen to that.
Right. And I guess some of the resistance that Major Ray Bradley is finding is that you can get atheist stamped on your dog tag, but they won't recognize humanism because they think it's a subset. In other words, Christianity they put on the dog tags, but not Catholicism. So he basically just wanted your thoughts on that.
I think humanism needs its own stamp. Now you can get the happy human symbol on your gravestone if you died in the military. Like if you're being buried at a military cemetery, you get the happy human on your gravestone, but you can't get it on your dog tags. And I think there does need to be humanist as a separate label because it is so different. It's tangentially, it's more post-theist. It's like saying you're a humanist is basically to say, okay, yeah, I'm not a religious person, but it's not the same thing as saying you're an atheist. Now, I happen to be both an atheist and an agnostic and an agnostic and a whatever and a humanist, right? So I don't shy away from any of those labels, but atheism is not the first thing I would use to describe myself because it doesn't convey enough information about what I believe. It just says, here's what I don't believe. And it's not very interesting. If I was in the military, I would want to be listed as a humanist.
You said that they
I would take atheist. I would absolutely take atheist if it was, if that was my only option. But I would prefer to be labeled as a humanist.
Okay, now you said they'll put it on your headstone, your gravestone.
Oh, you can get the happy human on your gravestone. Yeah, at a military cemetery. Yeah, happy human is one of the logos that's available on gravestones at the military.
So they'll give recognition in death, but not while you're alive. I see.
What sense does that make?
I see. They will give you some respect after you're dead.
Do you have another question?
No.
I mean, I would take atheism, obviously. It's better than being labeled none. But anyways.
I guess you'd have to be a humanist first, because before you even realize what's going on with the God situation and religion, you would either have either be a good moral person or a bad person.
Well, the thing is, like, there's agnostics that are humanists. There's non-supernatural pantheists that are humanists. There's deists who are humanists. You know, it transcends so many. It's all without supernaturalism, but people who label as humanists are not necessarily all atheists.
Mm-hmm.
They're all without supernaturalism. But like my husband, right? My husband is a perfect example of this. He is not the church. When I married him, all I knew was he's not the church-going type. He now labels himself a humanist because he's learned enough about the philosophy through me to know that that's what describes him. He does not want to take the label atheist, even though he is, because he doesn't like the connotation. He doesn't care what other people think about religion. You know, that's a personal choice for other people. This is a personal choice for him. So the label atheist to him connotes the idea that you do care about what other people believe. He would like to be called an atheist, as if that's different. You know, so but there's a lot of people who are atheists who don't like the atheist label for a variety of reasons.
Yes.
And you know, we have to respect that, right? That labeling is a very subjective, individual thing, and I think we need to respect that.
I agree.
Yeah, I primarily use the label just because people generally know what it means. That's typically, but if I were to expand upon that, and usually the conversation gets to that way, you know, topics of humanism would come up, secular humanism more specifically.
Right. Right. Well, all humanism is secular. You know that, right?
Well, we were talking before how some
Right.
religious folk can identify themselves as humanists.
Well, yes, but they're all secular-ish in they're seculars. They're non-religious and non-supernatural in their approach to whatever they call their beliefs.
Right.
All right, so it's all secular. If they have a spirituality, it's a secular spirituality, which is, I know, hard, one of those, but trust me.
Well,
They're all seculars.
that must be definitely a hard point for you to sell to theists, then, I would assume.
No.
No?
No, I mean, the theists, people who believe in supernaturalism of any sort, if they agree with our values, and a lot of them do, you know, humanistic applies to them quite well.
Okay.
Humanism was a term coined about 100 years ago by some UU ministers, and it was specifically designed to label a non-religious, non-supernatural approach to morality.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what the word was coined to mean. And if we start saying, oh, it's inclusive of supernatural beliefs, then where does that leave humanism,
Yeah.
right? And humanists, right? We need to distinguish between people of faith and with supernatural beliefs who agree with our morality, but don't agree with our non-supernatural approach to life. That non-supernaturalism approach to life is central to what humanism is.
I agree.
So.
I don't believe I have any more questions.
Okay, so sorry, next question. Next question.
Personally.
Do we have anything coming from the live stream?
No, that's all we have for now.
All right. Any other questions from the audience? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. Your website, jen-hancock.com, and more information will be linked in the podcast notes for this episode. The live stream video will soon be available. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in.
And thank you, Jen. Again, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
All right, thanks for having me on.
You're welcome.